Brad Marchand. Man, you are killing me.
This guy, we talked about him on the first episode, how if he keeps his performance up, he's going to maybe go to the Hall of Fame. Like, I take all that back. This guy is, I don't know. He just finds ways.
I put him in my top 5 last week.
Yeah, you did.
Rallied for him. Said he could be the top 5 player in the league, and then he goes out and does, admittedly, one super funny thing to Tristan Jarry.
Yeah, at the beginning when he took the puck away from, like when he was trying to flip it to a kid, that was funny. That was hilarious. But then...
good thing.
With 23 seconds left in the game, punched him in the head and then speared him in the neck, or tried to.
Okay, give me your opinions on Brad Marchand as a hockey player away from his skills.
Yeah, skills, great. Other than that, he's a complete weasel. Like, he's a rat and he's a baby.
Okay.
Biggest baby in the league.
Expand on that a little bit.
I mean, early in his career, he has guys like Chara and Lucic babysitting him when he clips Sammy Salo, like hip bridges, like Henrik Daniel Sedin in the playoffs, when he does all this little dirty stuff that he does that he makes a living off of. But now the problem is, there's no Chara, there's no Lucic. Who is scary on the Bruins?
Nobody. So how does he keep getting away with it?
I don't know. And the thing that kills me is that, like, every time he does something, like, no one does anything.
Yeah. So
him.
I said this to you when I watched the replay of the game. From what I know as a hockey player, if someone blindside sucker punched my goalie to the side of the head, there would have been a whole line brawl
for sure
going after that player. Yeah. Not a single player got off the bench. Why did that happen?
Well, off the bench is a different story because you get 10 games for that. But in Letang's defense, he did something, but then the ref, funnily enough, held back Letang and not like Marchand. So Marchand was able to like squirm away like he always does. Crosby was there and he didn't do anything, so maybe he didn't see. But my gosh, like someone's got to do something because he always gets away with this. I don't know. It really bothers me. He's just a weasel. Like, he's everything good about his game gets taken away when he does this stupid stuff.
So we'll talk a little bit later about whether we think the suspension was deserving and why he keeps getting away with what he does. But just as a little bit of a history of Brad Marchand, he's been suspended a total of 6 times for 19 games in his career, which doesn't seem like a lot for how much he's done.
It's not even close.
He's only been fined 3 times in his career, ranging from a 5-game suspension for that low bridge on Sammy Salo in that crazy playoff series to, I think the most recent one was when he slew-footed OEL in November. He's got he had an in-person hearing earlier today, and he got a 6-game suspension.
6, yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about whether you think that was deserving, if he should have got more or less.
I'm surprised it was that high. I'm going to be completely honest.
I thought it should have been 10, but I really thought it was only going to be 3 because of his track history.
Yeah, exactly. I think 6 is like good for like considering what the NHL standard has been over the years. But I have a funny feeling he's going to appeal it because anything over 5 you can appeal. I have a funny feeling he's going to appeal it and it might go down.
Do you think the fact that he was a repeat offender had something to do with the suspension being so high?
Well, it says like not a lot of people like know what the distinction of a repeat offender actually means. So like when something like this happens, if a guy's a history of being suspended throughout his career and has a history of this type of behavior, that gets taken into account for the suspension.
Okay.
What repeat offender means is just determines how much money they lose. So repeat offender means if somebody has done something worth a suspension in the past 18 months and they do something again, they're a repeat offender. And what that means is, again, like I said, it determines the way they lose money. So let's say they get suspended and they're not a repeat offender for 5 games. The way it works is you're missing 5 days of work. So you lose 5 out of, let's say, 200 days in the season worth of pay. So it's like 5 out of 200. So it's a lesser amount of money. But now if you get suspended for 5 games, in Brad Marchand's case, 6 games, it's not by the number of days, it's in games. So it's 6 out of 82. So he's losing over $450,000 because of this.
I mean, which in the grand scheme of things isn't a lot of money for him.
For him, it's not. But that's what repeat offender means. Like when people say, "Oh, he's a repeat offender, so his punishment's going to go up," that's financial punishment, but the games wise, it's taken into account the player's entire history and obviously the specific incident.
That makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about why Brad Marchand's history of these dirty antics hasn't led to suspensions as we think they should have been. Now, I know who you're going to talk about pretty soon.
Where are you taking me?
I think the answer is most likely Jeremy Jacobs. And before Stefan goes on his absolute rant about Jeremy Jacobs, let me tell our followers who he is and what he does. So for anybody who doesn't know, Jeremy Jacobs is the owner of the Boston Bruins, notorious for being the most powerful owner in the NHL.
Mm-hmm.
He is currently the chairman of the board of governors of the NHL, and in layman's terms, that means he's basically Gary Bettman's boss. And when we start talking a little bit about why Boston always gets the most primetime games, why Boston always has the highest amount of Winter Classic games, why it seems like Brad Marchand should be getting triple the amount of games that he gets, do you think Jeremy Jacobs' sway over Gary Bettman has something to do with it?
I think you're naive if you think it doesn't. Absolutely it does. And it's not just Jeremy Jacobs. He works for all the owners, but like you said, he's the head of the ownership group. So obviously he's got more power. I think undoubtedly he has power over Gary Bettman. I mean, the Bruins, Boston's a huge market, so maybe it makes sense that they get primetime games or whatever. Okay, sure, you can say that's down to financials. It makes sense for the league to do that, but the Bruins have been getting away with this type of garbage
so much
for literally since I started watching hockey, and it's not even just Marchand. I remember 2 years ago, and everyone's gonna call me a salty Leafs fan. You can, I don't care. Zdeno Chara, when he was still there, punched John Tavares in the head.
I remember
during a scrum at the end of a second period early in the playoffs. Thank God he didn't get a concussion. But Chara comes out of nowhere, and just hooks him right in the side of the head. You're telling me that wasn't even a penalty? The refs didn't see it? Give me a break.
Yeah, speaking even about past stuff, it's not only that Boston's players get leeway, it's the retribution towards other teams that do stuff against Boston is so much more than it should be. And when I reflect on this, I think about the playoff game that Kadri had that terrible hit against.
Oh my gosh.
It was Wengel, correct? Was that his name?
Yeah, not Tommy Wingles.
Tommy Wingles. And not to say that Kadri's suspension was not deserved. It was a terribly dirty hit. I just think about if Brad Marchand was the one who gave that hit to Kadri, if it would have been a 6-game suspension in the playoffs?
I think it was 5 or 6 games,
and, I mean, playoff suspensions are compounded over what it normally should be, right? I mean, it just seems like Boston gets away with a lot. And once again, we are going to come across as salty Leaf fans here, but, the truth is the truth. From what I know is that the goalie plays, and you can attest this too, you played goalie. Goalies play an inherently vulnerable position. The goalie, Tristan Jarry, did not see that sucker punch. That could have honestly severely hurt his career.
It could have, and it's not even I mean, whether or not people agree with this or not, it's just a sort of an unwritten rule or a fact that goalies get extra protection when it comes to suspensions and hits and stuff like that.
And they should.
And, okay, yeah, let's say that they should. But yeah, he could have done this to anybody, and it probably should be a suspension. I think the way the NHL works is that and Brad Marchand actually has done this in the past. I remember when Plekanec played for, not for the Leafs, but in the past when he played for the Habs, I'm pretty sure Marchand got called to take a face-off and lost the face-off and just suckered him right in the side of the head.
I remember that too.
It shouldn't take for a goalie to get hit for this to be called. I'm glad it is starting to get called and suspended, but I'm also my cynical side. I kind of think that the NHL is now pretending that they care about head injuries because they're getting hit with a ridiculous amount of lawsuits. So my cynical side is sort of thinking they don't actually care about the players. They care about their bottom line and their settlement fees. I mean, whatever reason it is, it's good that they actually seem like they're starting to care a little bit. But yeah, it's about time. And this guy's been getting away with this type of stuff.
Yeah, it just seems like the correlation between terrible, obnoxious things that players on Boston do and the lack of retribution towards them is pretty high. And I start to wonder whether that sway has something to do with it. It definitely does,
for sure. And if anybody watching saw Gary Bettman stick up for Rocky Wirtz in the media after his outburst when he made some completely terrible remarks regarding the Kyle Beach situation at their town hall, if you think Gary Bettman was spineless for standing up or for sticking up for Rocky Wirtz, imagine what goes on behind closed doors for a guy like Jeremy Jacobs. I think, like I said earlier, you're naive if you think the power doesn't influence what happens on the ice and in terms of suspensions. But let's move on before we just keep beating a dead horse here.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the big pieces of news, like just a peek behind like what we do, we try and prepare the show a couple days in advance. And this week we just like the Marchand, we got hit with so much news leading up. And one of the biggest pieces of news, I was actually really surprised that this came through, was that the Habs fired Ducharme.
Mm-hmm. It seems like all Canadian teams are cleaning house in the coaching department. First we had Vancouver, then Montreal, then, like you just said, Edmonton. Have there been any more firings coming up soon? We'll talk first about the Dominique Ducharme, and then we'll move over to Dave Tippett. What do you think about the Ducharme firing?
I was surprised at first because like the season's a lost cause.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you adding another coach to your payroll? Like teams are bleeding money as it is.
They already got 3.
Like I didn't necessarily think it was like necessary because they were really bad. Like just lose out the season. You might pick Shane Wright first overall and you regroup, you fire him in the offseason and keep going.
Mm-hmm.
But then I kind of thought like, I think pride has to come in at some point. Like you're the Montreal Canadiens. You're the winningest team in the league's history. You got to stand for something. And looking at their last 5 games, they lost a combined 33-12.
Oof.
Like I think there comes a time, even when your season's already over, that you still have to like show some pride that you like want to at least make it seem like you want to turn things around, which I think they do.
And you think they're trying to save face by getting rid of Ducharme in this scenario?
I don't think they're trying to save face because like the season's already gone. I just think that's like, okay, we got to win some games and we got to look like we're like trying. Yeah. So maybe a new voice can help.
Yeah, so from my opinion, I really think this firing makes no sense whatsoever. Yeah. And I'll talk a little bit why I think that. First of all, Montreal is in a complete rebuild. Their team is relatively young. There's a lot of young stars that they're trying to groom some young prospects. And Dominique Ducharme has success coaching young kids. I mean, he won a gold medal at the World Juniors, right? I don't understand the point of this firing. The only NHL coaching history that we have of Dominique Ducharme is him taking, for lack of a better word, a group of misfits to the Stanley Cup final last year. That team, for all intents and purposes, should not have been a Stanley Cup team.
No.
And, we can give a lot of respect to the players on Montreal, but a lot of that success also went to Dominique Ducharme.
Well, a lot of people weren't giving him credit. A lot of people were like saying, "Oh, it was all Carey Price," which was a lot of Carey Price. I think he deserves some credit for that run. But I think I don't know, like the odds were stacked against Montreal this season after losing Price, Weber, coming off like a little bit of a Stanley Cup run hangover. I think everyone saw a little bit of a decline coming, but like this far down, like this deep of a fall, and you can't even seem to like get them going for like any game. You lose 7-1 to New Jersey, who is objectively one of the worst teams in the league as well. Like I think even if it's not his fault, even if the issues are run deeper than him, something has to give.
I agree. Usually the coach is a scapegoat when the team is doing poorly. I mean, one could make the argument that he had lost the room. It's just, in my opinion, like I said before, the only track record we have of him is winning a Stanley Cup. And then, sure, this year is Sorry, I apologize. It's been an absolute dumpster fire of a season. But can you really blame a coach when I think maybe 4 of their 5 best players have been on the injured reserve almost the whole year?
No, I don't think you can blame a coach entirely. But like I said, when something has to give, it's usually the coach. So I'm not necessarily saying it was the right choice, but I kind of understand that something had to give, and maybe they were thinking like new GM anyway. So might as well just use that bullet now. I don't know.
True. Okay, maybe let's talk a little bit about, and I know that St. Louis was hired as an interim coach. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about who we think will coach that team on a non-interim basis. Let's say when they hire a full-time coach, which will probably be next year. I want to get your thoughts. You think St. Louis stays, or who do you think is the guy there next year?
I think it depends on how they do. I mean, it's going to be really hard to judge them with this ECHL team playing in the NHL. Yeah. I think if he does well, I think it's maybe if he can like work with Suzuki and build a good rapport with guys like him and Caulfield, who are going to be like the 2 building blocks they have moving forward, and then maybe there's a shot. I don't know. I don't see it happening, but again, it could happen. But like, let's just pretend in this alternate universe that he doesn't keep the job past this season. Like, who's the first name that comes to mind for you?
Yeah. So even in a non-alternate universe, like you said, St. Louis is coming into a humongous dumpster fire. This team is not going to win games. Knowing the short memory that Montreal Canadiens fans and GM owners have is that, he might be on the block too, because he's just not going to win that many games.
No.
So when we think about who might be the coach next year, the first name that immediately came to my mind was Alain Vigneault. There's a lot of reasons why I think that. First of all, Montreal coaches need to be able to speak fluent French. They don't need to, but it seems like they need to.
It's a thing there. Yeah, it's a part of their history.
He seems like he can do that. He's coached Montreal before. He's a very experienced coach. He has some playoff experience, and he also has experience coaching rebuilds. I really thought he would have been the guy that they went to off the start. I was very surprised that they went with St. Louis, and what also made me laugh is that they announced that so quickly after they fired Ducharme. That must have been in the works for a very long time, right behind his back.
Yeah, they must have been talking about it for a few weeks and just like picking names, and then I think it's probably like once they figured out it was St. Louis, then okay, time for Dom to go.
There.
But I think Vigneault is actually a good shout. I can see him definitely taking over in the offseason. I feel like if he's the guy you want long term, you maybe don't bring him in this year, so you have a guy like St. Louis to just like ride the rest of the season out, give Vigneault the offseason to come in on a fresh slate. I feel like if they really think he's going to take them over long term, that's probably the way you do it. You
know what? That's actually a really good point, because if they would have brought the coach they wanted to bring in now, he would have lost a lot of games. He might have lost the room as well.
A lot of favor with fans, like goodwill. Like I think it's just important to give him a clean slate.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. I think I was actually scrolling through the Twitter responses on the Montreal tweet, like just to see who some fans were thinking of. And I saw like multiple fans say they wanted Patrick Roy to coach them. That I would love to see that, because it is inevitably gonna burst into flames, and I would love to see that as a Leafs fan happen.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this before off the show, is that usually unbelievable players don't turn out to be great coaches, and we saw that a little bit with Patrick Roy with his coaching history. Tell me about whether you think, or why you think he wouldn't be a great fit here.
His time in Colorado was very much a mixed bag. He had a great first season. I think they got like 110 or 12 points. But the writing was even on the wall that season that they were playing an unsustainable brand of hockey. Like they were giving up way too many opportunities, like high danger opportunities. Semyon Varlamov, who I think was the goalie back then, standing on his head. I don't know if he won the Vezina, but he was a shout that year because he was playing unbelievable. And then even considering that really good year in terms of like performance, over the 3 years that he coached that team, they ranked second last in Corsi for percentage, second last in expected goals against, and fifth last in expected goals for. So they were conceding goals and they weren't scoring. And, like they just weren't controlling the game at all. Like I don't think he's a great coach. Maybe, I mean, give him benefit of the doubt. It's been a while since that happened. Maybe he's changed his perspective on the game. Maybe you give him a shot, but I also just think his eccentric character, like he's a pretty out there guy. I don't know if he's a great fit, but it would be fun to see just because he's a character and he's got personality.
I don't think Montreal has any more opportunities to give a guy a shout. The guy that they give next has to be a guy that they think is there for the long haul, because let's call a spade a spade. It's one of the biggest franchises in the NHL. This franchise has been terrible for way too long. Their history kind of expects them to be great. They have a responsibility for that, and they haven't been very good. And I don't think they can give another guy a chance to maybe see where it goes. That's why I thought Vigneault was the guy to go. But you know what? Let's move on a little bit and talk about the second firing that just happened. Dave Tippett. Maybe I'll start off on this one. I think this firing was inevitable. I thought it was a perfect time to do so. I thought it was the complete opposite situation in Montreal. This was a team who coming into the season was expected to be, for lack of a better word, a playoff contending team, a Stanley Cup contending team as well. They got off to an extremely hot start at 16-5-0, but then everything hit the fan. Went on multiple 6-game losing streaks. They were 7-13-3 in his last 23 games. Tippett clearly lost the room. We could even see what he said about Koskinen. He hung them out to dry. In my mind, you want to fire a coach when he had, one, clearly lost the room, and number two, the team is performing very poorly. And both of those were true here.
Do you think it's, we saw what the hiring of Bruce Boudreau did in Vancouver. Do you think it's a little too late for the Oilers here, or do you think now they have a chance to regroup and go on a heater?
I think the second one for sure. A lot of times a new coach coming into a room, a new voice, a new culture and attitude can really jumpstart a lot for the players. And, it'll depend. If the new coach comes in and they lose 5 games in a row, this team isn't making the playoffs. But if they can somehow, like in Vancouver, win 4 or 5 in a row, even if their next, let's say, 10 or 15 games are at 500, I still think that early boost of confidence is enough for this team to make the playoffs. And they should make the playoffs. The team overall is very good.
They have holes, but they're 2 of the top 5 players in the league should fill those holes to make them a playoff team. Like I'm looking here, their next few games are against the Islanders, the Sharks, the Kings, the Ducks, and the Jets. Like they gotta win 3 of those.
More. They have a chance to go on a run here.
They very well can. Yeah, those are not great teams, and they're competing against them in like these are the Sharks, the Ducks, and the Kings are all divisional games that are going to be huge for their playoff race too.
Yeah, I mean, new coaching isn't going to fix what's going on between the pipes, but let's hope it leads to an increase in scoring, an increase in positive attitude, and you never know what can happen. But one thing I want to talk about here is that was the new coach hired on an interim basis, or is he their full-time guy?
I'm not 100% sure because when the NHL tweeted it out, sometimes they say interim, but they didn't say it. So I think his name is Jay Woodcroft. It just said head coach. Okay. So I mean, I'm not too familiar with him, but maybe he can go on a run.
Let's assume that he is on an interim basis because we don't know. Do you have any guys in mind that you think should coach that team?
I haven't looked deep into this, but I've seen a few people saying, "Oh, Mike Babcock might be a good shout."
No.
Well, I think the rationale behind that was you saw what he. I mean, let's ignore maybe some of his shortcomings when he was a coach for the Leafs, but when he took over the Leafs, he did instill a pretty good culture, a good structure to the game. They played boring hockey sometimes, and I think he sort of lost touch with the situation towards the end of his stay here. But he did do some pretty good things. People often forget about that. I think maybe the game passed him by just because he's a pretty old school guy. People were saying, he plays a pretty defensive brand of hockey. The Oilers can't keep pucks out of their net. Maybe if you play defense first and you let McDavid and Draisaitl do their thing when you do have the puck, maybe you can, maybe he's a good fit. But I don't know about that.
Yeah, I'm going to respectfully disagree with you here, and I understand. Well, I understand what you're saying, but there is a stark difference in situation between Mike Babcock coming into Toronto and Mike Babcock hypothetically coming into Oiltown, and the difference is that everything he had done in his past is now exposed. When we talk about him going out and doing those really awful things to Mike Modano, where he almost didn't want to play him, so he could get those.
Well, he didn't.
What
do you mean? I think he was at 1,499 games, and he sat him. He didn't get there. He's still sitting at that.
So that's what I mean. So now what he did to Mike Modano, what he did to Mitch Marner, overall we now know Mike Babcock is not a great guy.
Yeah, he wouldn't be my first choice either. I would just sort of I was commenting on what I've seen. I think the game's passed him by, to be honest. Yeah,
what worries me now is that, so in my mind, when Ken Holland should be going for a coach that is, number one, going to form a cohesive room, and number two, who has experience coaching, is a veteran coach, because you don't want a new guy coming in to a team that has a chance to make the Stanley Cup playoffs. So Mike Babcock hits that, the veteran aspect. I just don't think his ability to form a cohesive room, given what he's done in the past, is going to work. Because these players aren't stupid. They know what he's about. They know what he's done. When he comes into the room, I expect them to be skeptical, and I don't think it would have worked.
Well, when you have 2 Hart Trophy winners, like McDavid and Draisaitl, chances are Jay Woodcroft can go on a run.
Yeah.
But I came across a article in The Athletic this week that talked about sort of what the Hart race was looking like based on numbers more than anything. But I want to ignore the numbers for now because we'll get into who this article had in a second. But I want to say right now, who do you think halfway through the season gets your Hart vote?
So who do I think should get it, or who do I think will get it?
Well,
that's a big difference.
Who do you think is the Hart Trophy winner? Angelo's opinion. So
the Hart Trophy should be awarded to the most valuable player to their team. Yeah. Oftentimes it's awarded to the guy that scores the most points in the year.
Which is kind of bogus, but
extremely bogus. But in this situation, when I think of the guy who is the most valuable player of their team, there's only really one guy that comes to my mind, and that player is Nazem Kadri.
Nazem Kadri. Okay, I like it. I love for Naz.
Yeah, let me explain this a little bit. In Colorado, the team has been riddled with injuries all year. We have guys like Makar, Rantanen, Landeskog, Kemper, Nichushkin, Burakovsky, McKinnon, I'm basically naming their whole roster, that have missed extended periods of time. The one guy who has been steady in the lineup has been Nazem Kadri, and the one guy who has not played with stars on his side has also been Nazem Kadri. When you look at what he's done with virtually no star wingers, like, this is crazy. He's T3 in the league in points, 4 behind the leader in Jonathan Huberdeau. Only 31% of his goals are on the power play, and only 31% of his points are on the power play. The reason why I say that is so people don't counteract me with the argument that, he gets most of his points playing with McKinnon and Landeskog. Like, he doesn't.
He doesn't.
Right? That's And by the way, if anyone was listening to our last episode, that 31% is like 8% less than Draisaitl and Matthews, because they get a crap ton of points on the power play. It's clear he scores 5-on-5. One of the reasons why I don't think he will win it is because he's been notoriously underrated and also outshined in his whole career. When you look at his tenure with the Leafs, he had played on the second and third line behind really big names. Babcock really hated him. When you look at him on Colorado too, the names there are star-studded. They're insane.
Yeah.
He plays on a second line with no big names, and most importantly, he's always been thought of as a goon-type player, and you don't normally associate one of the best players in the league with also a guy who is a goon. And I can even think now that when I ask you to name, or a general hockey fan, when I ask them to name the top 20 players in the league, Nazem Kadri doesn't come to their mind, and this year he's definitely top 5.
This year he's been one of the best players in the league for sure. I also think he deserves a shout. I think I know refs have a little bit of a bias against him because he used to dive a bit in his early career. I don't know if the voters have that same bias, but they tend to have a bias for bigger names. I think he definitely deserves some love, though. Which
is why I agree that he will not win the Hart. But I think if the Hart was given in terms of the integrity of what the award stands for, I think the most valuable player to their team is undoubtedly Nazem Kadri. Who do you have?
Well, I have here in my notes, if based on the definition, I think my guy's Shesterkin.
Okay, talk to me about that.
He's the only reason people think the Rangers are a cup contender. I went on my rant, what was it, first episode, about how they're actually not a very good team on the ice, but they have a goalie who puts up 40 saves a game, makes a highlight reel save every game too. I think it's rare that the a goalie wins it. I think the last goalie to win it might have been Carey Price when he was objectively the best player in the league.
And I can't think of another goalie.
Yeah, me neither. But I think, again, based on the definition of the award, he's been the most valuable player to his team in my opinion. I think Naz is also a really great show, but we both agree that they likely won't be the winners of this award.
No, I think the winner of the award will come somewhere from Edmonton. I think it'll be McDavid or Draisaitl. They'll finish the year with the most points. Or, maybe for nostalgia's sake, they might give it to Ovi.
Maybe. I kind of would like to see that. I'm always rooting for Ovi to do well. Do you think, I'm going to be a homer here. Do you think Austin has a shot? He's been so good this year. He is, and you know what? The thing is that people always knock him for his defense. We talked about that last week. It's actually not that bad. So according to Dom Luszczyszyn's model of the Athletics, the numbers guy, I always reference his stuff. He has the 11th highest defensive value of any player this year.
A forwards.
No, I think it's, maybe a forwards, because defenseman, obviously, but yes.
Well, that's, for a guy that does what he does
and he scores
offensively.
Yeah.
For him to have the 11th highest defensive rating is very remarkable. I don't think that defensive rating would be factored into the Hart, but it definitely should.
It should, right? It should. And another stat here, so Dom has this, it's a proxy for WAR, wins above replacement, how many wins are you worth to your team? So the gap between Matthews and the second top player on the Leafs is 1.2 wins.
Wow.
And that's the highest of any gap in the league.
Wow.
So kind of demonstrates that he's really important to the Leafs compared to how important other players are to their team, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. What you're demonstrating is that he's extremely valuable to his team. Oftentimes though, like we said, going on, is that the Hart will most likely be given to the guy with the most points. And
unfortunately,
Austin Matthews doesn't have a track record of racking up points. We alluded to this a bit in the last episode. His max has only been 80 points in his whole career. I think he's on pace for 110, which if he hit 110, I think he could win it.
He could be nominated at least, maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Well, the reason I kind of brought up this whole topic of this Athletic article is because the model had Johnny Gaudreau as the favorite right now.
Johnny Hockey?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's actually kind of impressive, though, the low-key season he's having. That line, he's on maybe one of the best, arguably the best line in hockey with Lindholm and Tkachuk.
Yeah.
But he he leads the league in 5-on-5 points. He has 37. He's top 10 percentile in like top 10% in offensive and defensive value. Their offense in terms of their transition, how they set up on the power play, and even on 5-on-5 really runs through him. And I don't know. I think he's having a really under the radar season. I'm not saying I agree that he should win the Hart, but I think he deserves a little bit of recognition.
Yeah, no, I agree. Just once again, he probably won't win because the name isn't big enough.
No.
But I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, who was the last guy to win the Hart that wasn't a huge name? Probably Taylor Hall in New Jersey.
Yeah. And
time and time again.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, time and time again, it's given to a huge name. But I mean, what you've been saying is like, yeah, those stats are insane, and he should be nominated. I don't know if he will. I mean, in general, he's a very underrated player. And
yeah.
I mean, speaking of underrated, maybe we talk about this a little bit, go off on a tangent.
Okay.
Really quickly, who do you think is the most underrated player in the league? And when I say underrated, I don't mean a guy that nobody knows. I mean a guy who is not given the respect he deserves, irrespective of how big the name is.
Well, is it okay if I use Johnny as my answer?
Oh, okay.
Because another point I want to say about him is a valid knock against him his whole career has been that he's not really good defensively. He's very one way, and when you neutralize him, as you've seen in the playoffs, he really doesn't add value. But I think, this year deserves a lot of credit. Like I said, he's in the top 10% in the league for defensive value. And people may say, well, Daryl Sutter came in, very defensive coach, that's why. But I don't think it's that simple, because they've brought in defensive coaches in the past and it still hasn't worked. Like, I think maybe he's kind of had a mindset change, or realized like, hey, in order to do well, to play my best, I need to play defense too. Maybe it's the fact that it's a contract year and he's busting his gut a little bit more to play on both sides of the puck. But I don't know. I think Johnny would be my answer. If I had time to do a little more research, I can maybe come up with another name, but I think he's a good show. Who do you have?
Surprise, surprise. Player has his best season in a contract year. We've never seen that before, have we?
No, he's going to get paid a lot of money and might not be worth it, but right now I think he's having an under the radar season.
Mm-hmm. So the most underrated player I have in the league, I mean, I would say Nazem Kadri, but I'll give a different name. It goes by the name of Ryan Hartman in Minnesota.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Judging by your reaction there too, not a lot of guys know who Ryan Hartman is, let alone how good he's been this year.
First round pick, right?
Yeah. 33 points in 42 games this year. I mean, something funny enough, he scores like literally none of his goals on the power play. He's got 1 goal and 2 assists on the power play this year.
Wow.
Only makes literally under $2 million. I think he's at 1.7. Adds crazy scoring depth for Minnesota. Plays in a small market league. I think if that guy was a free agent this year, he'd probably make 6.5, maybe more. When I think of a guy who is not only not known as a household name and also not given the due respect he should be given, Ryan Hartman definitely comes to mind. He plays in probably the smallest market in the NHL, next to Arizona.
Yeah, like a smaller market. They're like, I think they're underrated team as a whole. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if they made a deep run this playoffs at all. Yeah,
I mean, I'm rooting for them. I always like to see the underdogs shine. But I mean, Ryan Hartman is definitely my guy.
Yeah, I think he's a good shout. He's been a fantasy god this year too, for those who follow along. But I think we're gonna switch subjects here to talk about the Olympics.
Okay, the Olympics.
So the Olympics, the men's tournament just started. Canada won today, I think 5-1 or something against Germany. But I couldn't help when I was following the game, I was watching it, just like saying to myself, man, I wish the Stars were here.
Oh, it sucks. It would have been the coolest tournament we would have ever seen.
Yeah.
Canada might have had the best team they've ever constructed on paper. But I mean, we've heard blatant discontempt, from outspoken players in the NHL. Guys like Marchand and McKinnon were like considering retiring, going to play, and then coming back, but we all knew that was never going to happen. I mean, from a fan's perspective, it really sucks that we don't get to see it. But I mean, it's a different argument to talk about. Whether the NHL made the right decision not sending the players there. And number 2 is, if you were an NHL player, would you go? I kind of want to talk about both of these.
Okay.
Let's talk about the first one. I want to get your opinion. From the perspective of the NHL as a corporation, do you think they made the right decision not letting them go?
Probably. I don't like giving the NHL credit a lot of the time, but I think they did. And a big reason is because, one, when they made that decision, Omicron the numbers were soaring. Mm-hmm. I think over 500 players and staff had gotten infected with COVID over that stretch of time, they had to make up a bunch of games. They wouldn't have been able to finish the season had they not gone. Had they gone. So I think from a perspective of like maybe trying to keep your athletes safe, but more so when we know this is the answer, to make sure we got all our season and fulfilled our, duties to our to our TV deals and stuff. I think ultimately from a corporation perspective, from a business perspective, that was the decision that they had to make. Yeah,
for sure. What you're alluding to is completely correct. At the end of the day, the NHL's greatest, most valuable assets are their players.
Yeah.
Right? The NHL would love to see... Actually, I take that back. They really don't care whether the players go to the Olympics or not. Their number one rule is, will these players, these assets, be here when the ratings are the highest, and that's in the playoffs. I mean, when you look at the quarantine rules that were coming up in China for these players, I'm pretty sure that if they tested positive, the quarantine could have lasted anywhere from 21 days, so 3 weeks, up to 5 weeks in accordance with the law.
Yeah, that's
I mean, this would have been so problematic for NHL players, not only personally, but for the NHL as well. Those players would have missed a significant amount of the season. It would have messed up matchups, TV ratings in the regular season. And then who knows if these players aren't fit to play in the playoffs. I mean, the NHL, I thought it was a no-brainer decision for them not to let them go. Am I happy about it? Obviously not.
No.
I wanted to see Canada win another gold.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I think it's true. And you touch on that personal perspective. There were guys even saying leading up, is oof, I'm kind of teetering here. I don't know if I want to go or not, just because they heard about these quarantine rules. Also, an underrated aspect is if they were to miss more games, if they were to miss games quarantining, they would have lost out on that pay for those games.
For sure.
Which is, these guys make millions of dollars, but that could be in Brad Marchand's case, misses 6 games. That's $500,000.
Very
right?
true. So let's continue with what you were just talking about. From your perspective, if you were an NHL player, would you have wanted to go to China for the Olympics this year?
I think it depends on my level of experience. If I'm let's say, I don't know, a guy who's been to 2 Olympics before. I don't want to use Crosby as an example because I think Crosby would have gone because he's Crosby. But if I was a guy who had been to 2 Olympics before, won a gold in Sochi, then maybe I would have been I would have weighed the pros and cons, and the cons might have outweighed it a little bit just in terms of my own safety, just being with my family when there's a pandemic. You value that. But if I was a guy maybe like Cale Makar, who was new to was a young stud, was going to be his first chance at Olympics. He's very good, but you don't know what's going to happen in 4 years. Maybe I'd be more likely to take a risk if I was a guy who would be going for the first time. What about you? Yeah,
no, I completely agree with you. When I'm thinking about it now, there's 3 things that I would consider if I was an NHL player. Number 1, how old I am. Number 2, have I won before? A gold medal. And number 3, am I currently in a position to make a run at the Stanley Cup this year?
Yeah, that's a good point too.
Right. So for a guy like Crosby, I mean, he's won an Olympic gold before. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Pittsburgh has a chance of winning the cup this year. Yeah. If I were him, if I wanted to cement my legacy with 4 cups, I wouldn't take the chance going to the Olympics. But if I'm a guy like Steven Stamkos, who's won 2 cups, who's never won an Olympic gold, you better believe I want to go. Yeah. You better believe I want to go. And I know he plays on a Stanley Cup contending team, but everyone wants to represent their home country. Everyone wants to win a gold medal. If I'm Stamkos, I want to go. The last thing I'll say is and you brought up the quintessential example of this, if I'm Cale Makar, I'm young. I know I'm going to have future chances of going to the Olympics because I'm the best defenseman in the NHL. And I'm currently on a team that has their window to win the Stanley Cup right now. If I'm Cale Makar, the last thing that I want to do is go to the Olympics, because if I'm stuck there for 5 weeks, who knows what happens with the Colorado Avalanche while I'm not there. And let's also remember, if Cale Makar is stuck there for 5 weeks, McKinnon is stuck there for 5 weeks.
Possibly, yeah.
Right? Rantanen could be stuck there for 5 weeks. You never know what could happen. You want to be as fit as you can for the playoffs. Yeah, I mean, overall, in general, if I were a player, as much as I would love to represent my country, I probably wouldn't have gone either. Yeah,
I think the Stammer example is a great one, because he's one of those guys who's a little bit older, but would definitely be going.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I don't think Steven Stamkos would have another Olympics after this.
I doubt it.
Right? And even if he did, he might not make the team because he's old. Right? So, yeah, those are good points.
What about a guy who was always sort of on the cusp of making a Team Canada, but never was quite there? Is a noted All-Star MVP, Claude Giroux. Want to talk a little bit about him, because his name has been in the rumor mill like quite a bit since, like even before the All-Star game, but now since he won the MVP, even though it's a meaningless MVP, it's kind of sparked some more conversation. So if you had to pick one team that he would fit best where would that be?
Oh, okay. So where he fits best and where I think he's going to go are two different questions.
Okay.
There's a lot of speculation for anyone listening that Claude Giroux is going to get traded at the deadline.
Yeah.
The teams that have been outspoken for him were Colorado, Boston, Tampa, maybe even Toronto too, Minnesota, and the Rangers. When I think of where he should go, I'll answer that question. Two things come to mind. A team that, A, requires secondary scoring, and number two, a team that's obviously looking to make a push and is a player away from either getting into the playoffs or being a contending team. When I think about that, I know a lot of people talk Colorado. I think Colorado makes no sense whatsoever. They have so much scoring in McKinnon, Rantanen, and Landeskog. Their secondary scoring is arguably some of the best in the league. Kadri, like I just mentioned, Burakovsky, Nichushkin, even Newhook has been scoring this year. I do not think Colorado wastes any picks to go after Claude Giroux. When I think Tampa, I don't think Tampa makes sense either. The answer I'm going to give is Boston.
Oh, boy.
As much as I don't want Boston to win another cup, what I do know is that past that first line, which is arguably the best line in the league, there is zero secondary scoring. On the second line, there's names like Coyle, DeBrusk, Hall, who have all had like less than 10 goals this year.
Yeah, like those are kind of big names, but their actual performance has been kind of mediocre.
Yeah, the Stars are clearly nearing their end of their the peak of their career. They kind of look like they want to make one last push before a complete rebuild happens. I expect them to be large buyers at the deadline, and just because they need secondary scoring, I think Claude Giroux is the guy.
I think even just the way he plays, like he's a little bit rugged. He's a little bit of a prick sometimes too. Like he fits just the way Boston plays. Like Boston and Philly are both kind of that rough and tumble team. I think that's actually a great show.
So let me ask, where do you think he's going?
I don't know. When I started thinking, I thought I mentioned them earlier in the show. Minnesota, an underrated team.
Okay.
They have great depth, but I think a guy like Giroux, who wants to win on this team, who kind of play that same rough, grinding game, he's a guy who can do that, but he also has the top end skill to score goals. I think right now in their top six, he slots reasonably well in that second line. I mean, Matthew Boldy has been really good, but he's still a rookie. Like, do you want to really, bet your house on a rookie, playing really well in the playoffs? It happens, but if I could have some reassurance in a Claude Giroux to stick on that second line, even play center from time to time. I think he plays center. He can play on the wing. He's pretty versatile. He plays on the power play, of course, and that's a team with, if you can have Kaprizov going, feeding one-timers for Giroux, that's something I'd sign up for as a Wild fan. So I think they're a good option. And like I said, I think they're that one piece away from being a really good shout for a long playoff run. Unfortunately, they have to go through a Colorado and a Vegas to make the finals, but I wouldn't be surprised if they go to the conference finals possibly.
Yeah, I mean I would like to see it, but like you said, their road to the finals is very, very, very difficult. I don't think it would happen, but I think getting Giroux gives them a better chance. Right. I like that pick. The last thing that I'll say is, once again, going off the secondary scoring aspect, is that the Rangers kind of seem like not a bad look right now. And the reason I say that is because, past Panarin, Kreider, Zibanejad, that I'll play on that one line. I mean, the secondary scoring isn't really there. Capo Caco and Lafreniere haven't really panned out. I think
Still young, but yeah.
I think Lafreniere has like 10 goals on the season. Strome doesn't score either. Barclay Goodrow's way overpaid. I mean, when we think about a player that could round out secondary scoring, I think Claude Giroux goes there.
Okay, yeah, it's a good show. I think now is a good time to. What do you think?
Why don't we talk a little bit about the Leafs?
We'll talk on the Leafs a little bit. Okay.
A little bit quickly. The Leafs have been on an absolute roll lately. One name that really comes to mind is Mitchell Marner, who there's been a lot of contesting, but since his return from his injury, he's got 10 goals in his last 8 games.
He's been on fire.
What's the first thing that comes to your mind in the Leafs media when we talk about Mitch Marner?
Bad contract.
Shut up. A lot of people talk about a lot of bad contracts on this team, but I think that narrative is largely undeserved. And I want to ask you a question. Do you think there is a single bad contract on the Leafs? And if there is, talk about it.
One. And it's Nick Ricci.
Oh, okay. Talk about it.
And it's not even like a fault to him. Like he's a decent player. He just can't be making 2.5 on the fourth line of the Leafs. Not even on the fourth line. He's a healthy scratch right now. I think he's honestly the only really clearly bad contract.
True. You brought up a good source of statistics earlier on in the show. Dom from The Athletic does a really good job of talking about the market value of players. Yeah. And when we go look at player cards really quickly, the names like Austin, Tavares, Mitch, and Willie are the names that usually say, oh, you know, they're way overpaid. 50% of our salary is ties up the cap. I mean, all of those players have a market value above their average annual value, except for John Tavares, who's like 300 grand less.
Barely.
It's very small. When you look at a guy like Austin who makes 11.63, he's a Rocket Richard candidate every year. Seems like a lock for 40 every year. And in terms of stars being paid, when we think about Nathan McKinnon probably going to get 13-14 million next year,
it's gonna be higher than Matthews probably.
Right. If Matthews was a free agent this year and was going to a team that wasn't looking to save on the cap, it's fair to say he could make almost 15 million.
Depends if the cap goes up too. Then I 100%.
Right, for sure. And to be making 11.63 for the next 3 years does a lot of good for our cap.
Yeah.
When we start going off about Mitch Marner too, you know, he's on pace for 35 goals and 92 points. I don't care what anybody says. He's definitely worth over 10.
I think it was just the nature of that contract negotiation put like a sour taste in Leafs fans' mouth. Admittedly, my mouth too. Like I wasn't pleased with how it went. I thought at the time like almost $11 million for the second best player on our team was a lot of money. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, he's a hockey player for the Leafs. He's really good, so I want to support him.
Yeah, I even think Braden Point taking a lot less money right after that too.
That's a great point.
Pissed a lot of people off.
Yeah.
But when we look at purely statistics, Mitch Marner's contract isn't bad. And so the last thing I'll talk about is that what is the one name on the Leafs that when you think of bad contract comes to mind in terms of Leafs fan base?
Bad contract?
Yeah.
Another one?
Yeah, for me that name is William Nylander,
yeah.
right? When he signed that contract and he came back halfway through the season, he didn't have a very good season. And the narrative since then has been his contract is bad. But when we look at it, he's on pace for 32 this year. He looks like he gets better every year. I want you to name me a bona fide 30-goal scorer that makes less than $7 million if his name's not Pastrnak and Point. And the reason I say that is because if those two guys were free agents right now, they'd both be getting over 10, 11.
Yeah, easily. I don't know if I can name one off the top of my head. Like I think one that comes, I don't know how much Chris Kreider makes, but let's be real, he's not putting up 50 ever again.
No.
This is like lightning in a bottle for him.
Yeah.
So I don't even think he counts. Like Willie is consistently that. People have been trying to trade Willie since he got drafted. I never understood the obsession with him, with getting him out of here. Sorry, I have an obsession with Willie, but guys in the media, I've had the opposite. But I think anyone who still thinks he isn't worth his money is deluded.
Yeah, what's fascinating too is that he's on term. Like he's going to be making under 7 for the next 5 years.
I don't think it's that long. I think him and Matthews come out at the same time. So in 2 seasons after this.
Oh, okay. So fine. That's
still a couple more runs in them.
Right. I mean, There's a couple more runs. The cap is going to continue to go up. They have stars that are staying for a while. That opens the cap for a chance to go get a name for $4 or $5 million to make a run.
Yeah, it depends how much the cap goes up.
Right, there's just not a bad contract on this team, and I mean the only problem with a hard cap is that when you have a bunch of guys tied up in the way that the Leafs do, you have to go out and get depth players for cheap. And as you alluded to it last episode, Kyle Dubas has done an excellent job
with that.
Kasha, Kampf, Mikheyev, Bunting, Simmons, Spezza, all less than $2 million.
Yeah, it's unreal. I think if you look at Bunting in particular, you talked about Dom's player cards. I think this is like crazy inflated, but it's like $8 million he's worth. Like we all know he's not, but that just shows the value that he's provided. Done a really good job of replacing Zach Hyman, who we miss, but he's been a pretty good gap there. He's a stopgap there.
Yeah, the only depth player I can think of that makes over 3.5 is Kerfoot, but I mean he's clearly living up to it this year. He's a second line winger now, right? I mean that's what he's worth. Most second line wingers who play well are usually getting paid 4 or 5.
Yeah, and he makes 3.5, I think.
Yeah, so worth it all.
Okay. Let's move on to our fantasy segment, our fantasy face-off.
Okay, let's do it.
Who do you want? Did you want to start? Or do you want me to go?
Let's hear your points pick first.
My points pick. Okay, so you picked Tage Thompson last week. I'm going to pick his line mate, Alex Tuck. He is other than Tage Thompson, literally the only other Sabre who scores and gets assists.
Gets a lot of minutes too.
Yeah, and their next 4 games are against Columbus, the Habs, the Islanders, and the Senators.
Oof.
Like 4 of the worst teams in the league. I think he has an opportunity here to put up a few points, hopefully go plus in a couple of games, and I think that's a good, especially considering those, on paper easy matchups. I think he's a good show.
Okay, so my points guy is my boy from the LA Kings. I give a lot of guys from the LA Kings. I love that team. Adrian Kempe.
Your guy.
On pace for 35 this year. He's having a absolute breakout of a season. They play on the 15th, 18th, and 19th, and they have Arizona and Edmonton in that stretch.
Ooh, yeah.
PP1 plays and scores on the penalty kill too, which is really important for leagues that have shorthanded points.
Mm-hmm.
Guy is an absolute stud. I have him on my fantasy team, and I recommend that you go get him too.
That's a good shout too. Bangers now?
You want me to start it off?
Sure.
Okay. A guy I talked about a little bit who hasn't been panning out as much as we all would have liked him to. But I think he's starting to break out a little bit, and I see signs of positivity. Goes by the name of Alexis Lafreniere.
Okay.
Recently promoted to the first line in New York, playing alongside Zibanejad and Panarin, which I think is very important, which is why I picked him. Goals in his last 2. Coming up, they got Detroit and Ottawa. Plays power play 2. One of the reasons I put him in the Bangers League and not in the points is because although he doesn't get as many minutes as most people would have liked, he's playing on the first line, and he's a very rough guy. He gets 2 to 4 hits a games, couple of blocks too. The only problem is he doesn't take many shots, but one of the reasons why I'm recommending to our followers to pick him up is because he's trending upwards. He might not only be a guy that you pick up for this next week, he could be a guy that, especially as a sophomore,
I think he's a sophomore, yeah.
As a sophomore, can be a guy that you can have a free keep next year if your league does that with rookies and sophomores.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's
a good suggestion.
Let's hear your pick now.
So I have, I'm surprised he was this, unowned. Is that a word? He's only 4% owned.
Okay.
It's Jordan Greenway from the Wild. I'm giving the Wild so much love this episode, unintentionally. Okay. But I think he's as a pretty good guy for a Bangers League. He gets anywhere from 3 to 6 hits, 6 on the really high end, but you're good for 3 to 4 at least most games. He fights every once in a while too. That team loves a fight for some reason. Mm-hmm. And he has 5 in his last 6. 5 points in his last 6. Wow. So you combine the hits with the fights. The hits with these points. He's pretty much not going to be owned in your league. So I think he's a pretty good option for guys, especially in leagues with a lot of teams where you need these low key guys.
Yeah, I agree. I actually had Jordan Greenway for a little bit on my team, and so the one knock against him is that he doesn't get a lot of minutes. It's still 14, 15, but he is almost plus every single night, which in a league where plus minus counts, I agree. I think he's a really good pick.
All right. So just a summary. Who was your points guy again?
Points I got Adrian Kempe, and who's your points guy again?
My points guy was Alex Tuck.
Nice. And on Bangers you got Greenway, and I got, you remember it?
Lafreniere.
There you go.
Okay.
Let's
move on now. What's last?
Ooh, you already know this is my favorite part of the show. I love watching you worry a little bit when trying to answer these questions. We're going to move into the trivia segment. So for this week, I'm going to name you a player. I'm going to name you a year. And I'm going to ask you to tell me who played in the Stanley Cup Final in that year. I want you to tell me who won the Stanley Cup Final that year. I want you to tell me in how many games they won that Stanley Cup Final each year. You get 1 point for each of them. And as a bonus, if you can tell me the Hart winner, the Conn Smythe winner of that year, you get an extra point.
So I need to name who played, who won, how many games, and the Conn Smythe.
Yes, the how many games might be the hardest part.
That's going to be tough. I'm just going to guess every time.
I have faith in you. So going off number 1, this is the easy one. We're going to talk about the year 2020, 2021, which was last year. Can you tell me?
2020, 2021. Okay, that was Tampa and the Habs.
Okay, that's 1 point.
Oh my gosh. Okay, Tampa won. I don't remember if it was in 5 games. My gut's telling me 5, but I feel like it was... No, you know why? It was 5 because I remember the mayor of Tampa was like, oh, it's okay that they lost because we want to win it at home. And then they did.
Damn. Okay. I like that critical thinking. And lastly, who won the Hart?
Conn Smythe.
Sorry. Conn Smythe.
Conn Smythe. Who won it? Was it Stamkos?
It was not Stamkos.
No.
It's okay. I'll give you another chance.
Was it Cooch?
No, man, you're guessing now. The answer was Andrei Vasilevsky.
Oh, okay.
Stood on his head that playoffs. I mean, not like it mattered. They won in 5. It was pretty convincing. Before we move on to the next one, I forgot to mention for anyone following along, see if you can beat Steph this week. Yeah. Comment on TikTok at Upon Further Review or Twitter at UFR Podcast _. Let us know if you beat him. See if you're on a 3-game streak. He performed pretty well for the last 2 weeks. So, if you're on a 3-game streak, I'll give you a lot of credit there. So, moving on. 2018, 2019.
Oh my. Was that Vegas' first year?
So I'll give you. So what's going to happen is that if you don't guess the
if I miss one of the teams, I'm screwed.
I'll give you one team. See if you can guess the team. So this is
19. So that was the year.
This is 2 years before.
This was St. Louis.
There you go.
Okay, St. Louis won. Who did they play? They played Boston.
Yeah.
They beat them in 7.
Conn
Smythe went to, I want to say, O'Reilly.
Damn, that's 4 for 4 there.
Okay.
See, you should give yourself more credit, man. That's
okay. Let's go.
You're 7 for 8 right now. Okay, let's move on. We're gonna go to one that's, I don't think this is harder. I think you got this one in the bag. 2008, 2009.
8-9. That was Sid's first cup.
So what does that mean?
So that would mean Pittsburgh won. They played Detroit.
Yes.
The second year in a row. Mm-hmm. That was that funny couple of years. I think it was in 7.
Okay, you'd be correct.
And I think the Conn Smythe winner. Oh, I feel like I gotta say Sid, but it might not have been. I'm gonna say Sid, but I might be wrong. So
you are incorrect. Take a second guess, just for the fun of it.
Is it Malkin?
It was Evgeny Malkin. Okay. So what are you? 10 for 12 right now. 10 for 12.
I think.
It's pretty good. Let's see if you can end it off with a nice perfect score here. So admittedly, in these years, it's very tough to differentiate who played and who won because it was just a flip-flop of teams. But let's see if you can do it. 2014, 2015. Think about it for a bit.
I am going to have to think about this one because I'm trying to remember. I know it was LA and Chicago, but I don't know who won on the even years and who won on the odd years. Mm-hmm. So this is 13, 14?
14, 15.
14, 15. Oh,
take a guess, and if you don't get it right,
I think this is Chicago's last of their 3.
You'd be correct.
Okay. Who did they play that year?
Wait, so are you saying Chicago won? Kind of obviously. Yeah, okay.
They did win. I'm pretty sure they won.
Yep.
I'm trying to remember who from the East was really good around that time. I don't know if the Penguins made it that far that time.
I can give you a hint. They're also really good right now.
Oh, boy. Wasn't the Rangers. Wasn't the Penguins. I'm running out of time here. What's my time limit? I gotta just guess somebody, don't I?
Take a stab at it.
Oh shit.
Last guess. In net. I don't know if at this time. Actually, no.
No, don't give me a hint. I gotta keep it.
Okay.
Keep the integrity of the game.
Fine.
Okay. I know it's not right, but I'm blanking because I know the Capitals didn't make it far. I said it wasn't the Penguins, but I'm just gonna guess the Penguins because I actually can't remember, and I want to hate myself when I find out.
Was not the Penguins. It was a team with back-to-back Russian goalies, back-to-back Stanley Cup champions right now.
Is it Tampa?
It was Tampa.
Oh my
Tampa
gosh,
Bay
they
Lightning.
made it that year.
It was
Wow.
a heartbreak year. A lot of people wanted to see them win because Chicago had won so many.
Okay.
Okay, so how many games did Chicago win it in?
It's got to be 6 or 7 most times. I'm just going to say 6.
6 is correct.
Okay.
Conn Smythe winner to round it out.
Who would it have been that year? I know one of those years Duncan Keith played like 45 minutes a game.
Okay.
I don't know if he won a Conn Smythe for that. I know Patrick Kane went off those playoffs too. I'm going to guess Keith, but I don't know if it was him.
Yeah, so in the past, you have had the error of guessing the right player first and backtracking on what you thought was correct. I'm happy that you went with your gut now because Duncan Keith is the correct answer.
Okay,
he did average about 72 minutes a game there.
Oh my gosh, yeah, they had 3 defensemen that one of those runs. I was just lucky it happened to be that one.
Yeah,
okay,
there
cool.
you go. So what did you go in? So there's 16 points in total. You got 3 wrong, so 13 for 16.
Hey,
I thought. I had faith in you the whole time.
Not
bad. So yeah, once again, comment on TikTok or Twitter and let us know if you beat him.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you'd want to say before the show ends?
No, I think I'm good. Brad Marchand lost all his goodwill, but other than that, what else is new?
Yeah. I might have to take him out of my top 5, but maybe we'll reevaluate that going into the playoffs and we'll see where he is.
Sounds good.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week, guys.